the TSOG stalketh the land, and the serfs bow, and yea, they worship it. It stealeth property, it burneth neighborhoods, it foully killeth all opposition. Ye think it only doth its violence to black people, or Hispanics, or kooks with odd religions, but its hand is at your own throat even now. Ya, Tsog Pathogan. What, are you stupid or something? Abdul al-Hazred, the Tsogonomicon. He wrote that over 1,000 years ago in prophecy. Maybe logic was invented by John von Neumann in 1933. Von Neumann is the unappreciated genius of modern science. Scientists appreciate him, but the general public, I don't think, has ever heard of him. He wrote one of the best books on quantum mechanics. He was one of the pioneers of programmable computers. We wouldn't have internet without him. Anyway, maybe logic, one of his major inventions, instead of dividing everything into true and false like Aristotle, which only applies in the abstract. Aristotelian logic only applies if you ignore the sensory, sensual, space-time continuum in which we live. If you take into context we live in a real universe, which we're touching things, bumping into things, kissing things, loving things, hating things, throwing rocks at things, and so on, you realize that most of our perceptions are in the maybe mode. They're not yes or no, they're not true or false, they're just maybes. I think maybe logic is probably the greatest invention of the 20th century, although, of course, von Neumann had a lot of competition. Koszybski offered an infinite-valued logic, in which between yes and no, we've got an infinite series of maybes. Anatole Rappaport invented a four-valued logic: true, false, indeterminate, and meaningless. Indeterminate is something which, in principle, we might be able to test someday, but right now we can't. We don't have the technology to test it. Like how much life is there in the universe? We just don't know. That's indeterminate. Meaningless are propositions that can never be tested because they're defined so they can't be tested, such as round squares eat red cabbage. First you got to find a round square before you can even begin to observe its eating habits. And since you can't find a round square, there's no way of ever testing that. Another one is the Catholic doctrine that after a priest pronounces the right formula over a piece of bread, it becomes the body of a Jew who died 2,000 years ago. If cannibalism is good for you, you should eat the body of the dead Jew and it'll make you feel good. I don't know, Catholics are not particularly fond of Jews. I don't know why they like that one so much, but they like eating him anyway. Everybody else thinks they're just eating bread. They think they're eating a human being. They think they're Hannibal Lecter. We think they're nuts. I don't know. But that's an example of a meaningless statement. It can't be proven or disproven. If they want to think they're cannibals, let them think it. We can't disprove it. We're not going to bother arguing about it. It's meaningless, like the round squares. Now the Vice President, Richard Cheney, has given us another three-valued logic: true, false, and despicable. The true statements are the ones the government makes, the false statements are the ones the enemies abroad make, and the despicable statements are the ones that we're not supposed to think about at all. I'm not sure he thinks he can stop us from thinking about it, but he wants to stop us from talking about it anyway. I heard him on CNN a week or so ago where he was asked about criticisms of the Bush administration. He described them as despicable. Yes is what you can prove, no is what you can disprove, and despicable is what you can't even test. You're not allowed to test it. It's the modern equivalent of the Catholic term heretical. You're not supposed to think about it. I'm proud to say this book consists almost 100% of despicable statements. Nobody is supposed to be thinking about these things. I don't believe there should be anything we're not allowed to think about.
Your new book, TSOG, seems your most political work to date. Why did you wait until now to write such a book?
Well, I think there's an undertone of satire on religion and patriotism in everything I've written. I regard religion and patriotism as the two major mental illnesses afflicting this planet. And there's an undertone. It's a theme in all of my books. But I guess it got more focused during the Clinton years, because I made the mistake of voting which I usually never do, but somehow Clinton inspired a faith in me. He pressed the right buttons. He used the right words. He used a lot of terminology from cybernetics and social science. He showed he was educated. I thought, gee, this guy is smart enough, he might actually do some good. Then he turned out to be as bad as any of the others and worse than most of them. And then it's followed by the crookedest election in American history, the crookedest presidential election. Anyway, we've had crooked elections all over the country repeatedly. Well, this is the crookedest presidential election ever, and then we get this unexpected, unprovoked attack, which was warned of by the French, the Philippines, FBI agents, and about 3 officers. Everybody knew about it except W, it seems. W was the only one who was out of the way. He didn't know it was going to happen. But curiously, he was out of the White House while the plane was headed towards the White House. Isn't that an odd coincidence? My God, what wonderful luck he has. Well, maybe he did read those reports after all. Maybe he can read. Who knows? I think the combination of the crooked election and the new Pearl Harbor, which looks as fake to me as the first Pearl Harbor. I was working on another book, and I couldn't get anywhere with it because I kept taking time off to work on this book, which I was going to write later. Finally, this book got finished, and the other one still wasn't. Because I never felt so optimistic about our potentials as I do right now with all the scientific breakthroughs that are occurring. I never felt so angry about the way we're not using our potentials. To quote Ezra Pound, it's like being in the middle of a rainstorm and seeing people running around with spoons saying, we can't get any water, we can't get any water, we got to kill one another over the water. None of them realizes that it's pouring down. How to give everybody on the planet clean drinking water would cost about $7 million. We can afford to give $3 billion a year to Israel to kill Arabs. We can afford $7 million to give everybody clean drinking water. If everybody had clean drinking water, that would cut down on the spread of AIDS, for one thing. It would also cut down on the amount of anger against the white world on the part of the 3/4 of the planet which is non-white. Just clean drinking water. Then if we gave people adequate medical care. You know, it's not true that terrorists hate us because of our freedom. We don't have much freedom for them to hate in the first place. And in the second place, they hate us for abusing them, for stealing their natural resources, for enslaving them, for making war on them, for dumping napalm on them from the air, for bombing them, for generally treating the third world like, well, most Americans have a dim sense of how badly we treated the Aborigines of this continent and how badly off they still are on their reservations. We have a dim sense of guilt about that. But 9 out of 10 Americans have no idea that we've been doing that to the rest of the world, too, for the last 100 years. All the Aboriginal, tribal, and some of the comparatively advanced cultures, they've all been overrun by American industry, backed by American soldiers with American guns, shooting at anybody who resists them. We've been invading third world countries since 1898 or so. Hell, if you include the first Mexican War in 1848, we've been invading the rest of the world for over 150 years. And my God, why are they fighting back? They must hate our freedom. How can people be so stupid as to believe that they hate us because we've been attacking them and robbing them for 150 years? That's why they hate us. Who the hell can hate somebody else for their freedom? They have more freedom than I have in Amsterdam. I don't hate them for that. I envy them for it, and I'd like to go live in Amsterdam. If I was still healthy enough to make a move of that sort, I would move to Amsterdam. TSOG is an abbreviation I invented for Tsarist Occupation Government because I discovered that everything I objected to in the United States government seems to trace back to James Jesus Angleton of the CIA or J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI. And leaving Hoover aside for the moment, Angleton had a definite alliance with Tsarist groups in Soviet Russia who were trying to overthrow the Soviet system, and with the Nazi general Reinhard Gehlen. And the CIA Tsarist Nazi alliance began to seem to me more and more the key to everything that's been crazy and bizarre and incomprehensible about American foreign policy in the last 50 years. I think the central thinking of the ruling class of the United States basically is within the Tsarist paradigm. They don't say so, but that's the way they act. As a matter of fact, they're more and more saying, we've even got a Tsar, haven't we? We got a Tsar And the Tsar, last I heard, was threatening to close down all the medical treatments he doesn't approve of, which sounds like Ivan the Terrible or Peter the Great, or one of those nuts out of the Dark Ages. As far as I'm concerned, the Inquisition never ended. The Catholic Church officially ended the burning at the stake epoch in 1819. The Inquisition still exists. It's called the Holy Order for the Doctrine of the Faith. All they can do is throw you out of the church nowadays. But they can't burn you at the stake anymore. But the Inquisition is still very alive there. And now the United States government has its own Inquisition. If you have any despicable ideas, God knows what's going to happen to you. And I got more despicable ideas than anyone. The FDA and the DEA between them have taken away most of the freedoms that are most precious to us. The destruction of the First Amendment by the Supreme Court is the major visible horror, because the Constitution says quite simply Congress shall make no laws abridging freedom of speech and of the press. Every year the Supreme Court sits down and decides whether a given law abridging freedom of speech or of the press is constitutional or not. And sometimes they decide it is constitutional, even though the Constitution says no laws. I agree with Justice Hugo Black. No laws means no laws. It doesn't mean some laws. But beyond that major abomination, the FDA and the DEA have closed down the 10th Amendment, which says all powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people. I think that ambiguity was deliberate, whether it's the states or the people. They want to give a chance for the popular vote to overrule the state legislature through the initiative of the state legislature to overrule the people if the people were too wacko at that time. They want to balance power every way they could. Now, neither the states nor the people have any power over the most important factors of their life, namely their medical care. There's 10 states that have legalized medical marijuana. The federal government won't pay any attention. When it gets to 20 states, will they pay attention? When it gets to 30, the government has announced that it doesn't matter what the people vote for in the referendum, it doesn't matter what the state legislatures enact. The states and the people both have no medical rights whatsoever. The government determines what's permissible and what's not permissible. That's the Inquisition all over again. They don't even have to go to court and prove their case. The Inquisition had to haul you in and give you a trial. They don't even do that. They just announce this is despicable. You can't think about it. You can't do it. And if the people vote for it, well, fuck the people. We don't believe in democracy anymore anyway. Haven't you noticed? They hate us for our freedom because we don't have any.
Is patriotism possible with maybe logic?
I don't see how. Patriotism is an identification with a given gene pool. I think it has decreased over the centuries because most countries are combinations of gene pools. Where you have one gene pool dominating a country, you still have really fanatical patriotism. It's patriotism, it's loyalty to the gene pool. As Haldane said, evolution has programmed us so that we'll die for a brother and risk our life for a cousin. And beyond that, who will risk his life for a stranger? Very few will. Some will, but they're rare. So it's sort of patriotism, gene pool loyalty is sort of built into us. But most countries are combinations of gene pools, most of which don't like each other very much and are in competition or have prejudices against each other. They're economically competing, they're religiously different, and so on. And so patriotism gets more and more attenuated. It only comes to the surface in a really virulent and obnoxious form when everybody feels equally under attack, which is what the terrorists want. They don't mind unifying us as long as we're all unified in the same terror. We're afraid of them. So they don't mind the fact that's bringing us closer together. So it's only bringing us closer together temporarily. In the Revolutionary War, there were black regiments. As soon as the war was over, they were re-enslaved.